Could really? Could you all just could you just go?
XOD, Extraordinary Dads!
What do they look like?
Extraordinary Dads!
Where can you find them?
Extraordinary Dads!
We want to see them. We'll go out and meet one. Extraordinary Dads!
Hello and welcome to the Ordinary Dads podcast, yet another episode.
It's even the Extraordinary Dads podcast.
Did I say Ordinary Dads?
Do you have another podcast that I'm not aware of? Are you cheating on me with the Ordinary Dads?
I'm podcast cheating on
Because I don't think I like it. Yeah.
Maybe I'll get found out on a kiss cam. The cam will swing in and I'll be recording with another person. He uses the same microphone with that other podcast.
Yeah. So who are we?
We're ordinary dads, and some might say extraordinary dads, who have an avid interest in connecting and sharing experiences with other extraordinary dads about the extraordinary act of parenting.
Yeah, extraordinary. Let's underline that. So this podcast explores the brightest highs and the darkest lows in the lives of everyday dads, revealing unsung stories of caring, resolve, love, disappointment, and everything in between.
We're here to learn and celebrate practical habits that regular dads have discovered to feel more successful as a parent, while also acknowledging the challenges and shortcomings that happen along the way. All right, we're officially in.
Welcome to the episode.
So this episode, we have the pleasure of speaking with Chad Kopensky, who is the proud father of a child with autism on the autism spectrum, and we thought it'd be great to talk with him about his day-to-day challenges and proud moments and all the stuff in between in his family situation. Before we get to this extraordinary interview, I want to check in with you, Donal. How are things going?
Can you write that word above your desk?
Extraordinary. What's going on for you, Donal? Proud moments, challenges?
Proud moments, challenges, what's working for me. I'll share what's working for me. And it's not necessarily parenting. It's just life in general, but just a reminder to incorporate your passions in your life on a daily basis, even small. And I've been doing this for a while, but back at the beginning of this year, I love poetry, as you know, Matthew, and there's a lot of wisdom and beauty that I take from poetry, and I love words. But back at the beginning of the year, I wanted to give more focus to that passion of mine, and so I made a commitment to myself that I would read one poem a day, to start my day with one poem. So that would kind of ground me and just help me remember that there's beauty to be had and there's wisdom to be had from words. And it's been terrific. And I've been slowly making my way through the very many poetry books I have on my bookshelf. It's just a reminder, one, of this passion that I love, and I'm giving it the attention that I want to give it. But it's also just, with parenting, has its ups, it has its downs. And on the days that I'm not feeling at my best, either as a parent or as a person, or somebody who works, or somebody who's in a relationship, or somebody who's a friend, that there's always beauty to be found in the moment of reading a poem. So that's what's working for me right now. Anything for you?
Yeah, I would love a poetry book recommendation, or maybe you can just lend me one. I always feel like I want to like poetry, but but I'm a base man of simple needs and simple pleasures.
Any challenge, any nugget, any proud?
The thing that I came in here wanting to talk about is a revisit of a few episodes back. We talked about Mayana wanting a a ritual of some sort.
Yeah.
Visited some friends, bat mitzvahs. We attended some friends of hers bat mitzvahs, and it was beautiful. And I was inspired, and I asked her if she was inspired, like would she like a ritual like that? And in the moment, she said yes. So. Well, the short circle back is like, now she does not. we started using we started using this book called the Virtues Guide. It's either the Virtues Guide or the Virtues Handbook. I've had this book for years. Like I may have bought it before Mayana was born. In a very like forward thinking dad moment of like, I really want to teach my kid some sort of spiritual guidance. And this book really caught my attention the first time I saw it. So it's been sitting on my shelf forever. And I honestly had wanted a chance to like an impetus to use it. So when we started thinking for Mayana I brought up Mayana's response with my wife Serena, and we're like, oh yeah, a ritual would be cool. And what, we're not gonna do any Jewish or Christian confirmation, or we don't have a religious tradition that we're following right now to build this, but we could do our own thing. And I was like, this is the perfect time to use the Virtues Handbook. So I got it out, and we basically it identifies across spiritual traditions, across faith traditions, 50 virtues, like 50 things that any of the faith traditions would acknowledge are like, these are useful, and some of them are unsuspecting. Like the first one that we did was flexibility, and the next one, we just did it a couple days ago, was assertiveness. And each one has a little spiritual passage, and a passage from a holy book, and then goes into what it means and how does it look like in your life. And as soon as we started reading these things where the word God shows up on the page, Mayana was immediately like, I don't want this. I do not want to be religiously indoctrinated. I don't want to, you can't tell me what God is. And so it was just really interesting to see that reaction in her. And also awesome. It's like, oh, she has, the rejection of a notion of wanting to be talked about by God is actually a form of spiritual thinking. So
were you able to dig down and then figure out where this came from?
We're in the exploration of that. Part of it wasn't like an existential dad challenge moment, but it was definitely a intellectual challenge of like, okay, hold on. We can't approach this exploration of virtues from a standpoint of God, because she has stated that she doesn't want that. And she's definitely having an allergic reaction to it right now. So maybe I can use this as my proud moment. But so first off, there was some context filling for her of like, hey, because she thought that she said she wanted a ritual, and therefore now her parents are doing this thing that's going to take a year of time. So we kind of structured a series of conversations for the year. But in her witnessing of it, it was like, I said I wanted a ritual, and now I've got all this shit to do for a year. So I had to reframe that.
Yeah. You think she's still receptive to a ritual of some kind?
Maybe. I'm hopeful. And I think part of this, what I hope becomes a year of study of these virtues, will land her in a place where she is open to it again. And maybe she won't be.
Good job, Dad.
Yeah. So we're underway. We'll see where it ends. I mean, if nothing else, it's just 2 chances to sit with our daughter in a thoughtful space.
Nico's not part of this?
Where I'm coming to is like, it's not his time. I did go through confirmation in the Christian church, in a Protestant Methodist church. And there's a time for it. you don't do your confirmation when you're 7 years old, because how could you possibly understand the stuff that the church was trying to have you understand? And you also, interestingly, like, you don't do it when you're 16, because I would have been totally rejecting anything that the elders were trying to teach me.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Okay, so shall we get into this episode with Chad?
Let's do it. Here we go.
XOD!
We are here with Chad Kopensky. Chad is a longtime friend of mine. We were buddies from middle school on. I'm trying to remember.
The summer that we were
fourth
both
grade.
8. Yeah.
That's a long time
Our
ago.
sisters conspired to make us friends. I currently live in a small town in southeastern Ohio. I'm originally from a small town in south central Wisconsin. I am married to my wife, Ruby. We've been married for 19 years. We have one daughter, whose name is Eliza, and she is 16. My wife and I both work. We have a ridiculous number of animals, 2 dogs, 6 cats. We just lost all of our chickens.
We had chickens once. I do remember this. It was a relief when we were chicken free, I will say. The grief will pass, Chad.
I never named them. I think one I called Pants. The rest I just called like Nugget or Soup or
When this podcast episode goes out, people will only be hearing your voices. But I am intrigued, since we are on camera, those pins behind you, Chad. I'm curious about what all those pins are.
I belong to one of those super secret organizations that are trying to take over the world, one pancake breakfast at a time. Short version is when I moved down to Ohio, it was a really difficult transition. And one of the things that sort of helped me reconnect to and establish my life was I joined the Freemasons, and I've been really heavily involved at the local, state, and national level. And every year, it seems like the different organizations come out with a different lapel pin. And I didn't think I'd become a collector, but I have. And each one of them is a story.
Yeah, there are several hundred of them, it seems like. So you've been active.
You are the father of one delightful child, Eliza, who is on the autistic spectrum.
Delightful? Let's go with delightful. Sure. Actually, Eliza is great. She really is. She was hard to come by. We had a number of, issues getting her. And once we got her, it just kind of came to be that we were only going to have one. She is on the spectrum. And as soon as people hear that, they immediately think of, whatever, the dude from Rain Man or the Good Doctor, and they immediately think whatever.
Do you have a description of, Eliza is, this?
Well, the thing about any kind of neurodivergence is that really, if you've met one person who is identified as neurodivergent, which could be, autism, ADHD. If you've met one person on the spectrum, you've met one person on the spectrum. For Eliza is what is called dual exceptional, which I think is hysterical. It is that if you were to test her in like all those battery of tests, there are certain areas where she's absolutely off the charts. Language processing, empathy. She read at an early age. That sort of thing. And then there's other places that she's absolutely off the charts, which are things like social skills and what they call the hidden curriculum. There are rules in our society. There are lessons in our society that aren't necessarily written, and that we all just kind of have learned. That when Renee Swanda, says something nice about you in kindergarten, it's doesn't mean that she wants to hear everything about the Green Bay Packers. She's just saying hi.
Social skills, it sounds like, or social cues.
But we've been pretty lucky. So Eliza, if you were to meet her now, you would, if you were aware of neurodivergence, you'd like, okay, she's got to be on the spectrum in one. She's that kid that, you would think of as like oh, that's a theater kid, or that's just that weird artistic, like doesn't easily fit the mold. And she doesn't. She is very artsy, very crafty, but in some ways also pretty immature. While other people in her peer group are, into dating and relationships and makeup and pop culture. It just doesn't interest her.
What are her interests?
She loves to read, so she anime. She likes if there's a book, she'll read it. Loves cats. She loves crafting. Um, sports don't interest her really all that much. TV shows don't interest her all that much.
Did we get her age in there?
16. She just turned 16.
What grade does that put her in? She's about to be a
junior. She's funny. She's kind, which is huge.
I have to imagine that this is shaped, so you were married to Ruby, and for a long time. So, and I have to imagine that, this, neurodivergence has shaped a marriage, a matrimonial divergence, or, that it impacts how you and Ruby form a team. Can you speak to that?
Yes, it does. It does change the marriage. I mean, not even change, but just becoming a dad or becoming a parent, that changes things. Having a kid, special needs. I mean, that was a journey, and that was a battle in and of itself. One of the byproducts of Eliza getting her diagnosis was all of a sudden I got a diagnosis. When the team came back and looked at Eliza, they said, if this diagnosis existed back in the 70s, they'd be like, you'd be all about that. And which made no sense to me at the time. But as I've gotten older and as getting a more official diagnosis and getting treatment, it made me a better person, but it also made me start to do a lot of metacognition. How do I think? And because if I can understand how I think, then I have a little bit more better insight on how Eliza thinks. And
what is your diagnosis?
They gave me a diagnosis of ADHD, but also they gave me the other one that's like the AU ADHD. What they do is they tick off like a range of things that happen. Hyperfocus, hyperlexia. What that does is, if you've got a wife who's an occupational therapist, if you have a dad, and my background is in educational policy, especially in terms of special ed law, plus somebody who's like themselves neurodivergent and whose family is neurodivergent, this kid was set up pretty well, from a young age.
A good container of like, we're going to get you.
Well, Ruby is very patient, which is wonderful. And Ruby is very much able to be that kind of balancing influence. Because what tends to happen, as probably many of us as dads, is you kind of locked into the moment. You get locked into whatever that is. Ruby is really great to being able to give that perspective and to remain calm when Eliza and I may not necessarily be calm, or we are fixated on one way of thinking or one approach. Ruby's like, have you thought about this? No, we haven't, but now we will.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is Ruby doesn't always necessarily understand Eliza's brain, or isn't always able to see things from Eliza's perspective the way that I can. And so we both have to kind of work together to kind of provide that structure, but also provide that curriculum, that scripting, that modeling of like, here's how you deal with this, or here's how you talk through this or process this. And some days it works, and some days it's, you fall down, but you get up and you keep on moving.
Which is not dissimilar from, just regular old non-neurodivergent parenting too.
That is one of the weirder, we'll go with Victories, is that when your kid does things that are typical of their peers, that drive you nuts as a parent, right? There's a part of you that just starts celebrating. You're like, oh, thank God. Like, okay, she's age appropriate, peer appropriate, right? Let me give you a perfect example of this. She did this journalism camp at the local university a couple weeks ago. And it was an overnight camp for a few weeks. And so we dropped her off at her dorm room. And Ruby and I are hanging around, mostly just to kind of see some of the other parents and see how
Any
it is.
tears in there?
No. I mean, well,
okay, all right. This is a safe space.
Yeah, I work at this university. Like, her dorm was literally like a block from where I work. But we're hanging around. Also, we kind of wanted to see some of the other parents. And Eliza was sitting on the bed. And every time we would walk by, she started saying, could you guys just please leave? Could you all just, could you just go? And at that point, then Ruby and I are like, well, hell, now we're going to stay a little bit longer. Just to annoy her. But as we're leaving, that was right. That was appropriate. That was right for her to be embarrassed. Like, I'm 16 and there's leave, Mom and Dad. And so you start celebrating that like, yep, she's where she's supposed to be.
That's great.
That's sweet.
And how was the camp experience for her?
She loved it. We are so worried about her forming appropriate peer relationships. After about 2 hours at the camp, she was texting us and saying, well, we are doing this and we are doing this. And I just said, like, who are we? And it was her roommate and the two, like, she had a suite, so there are 3 girls, like 2 on this side, 2 on this side. And we are doing this. And Ruby and I were like, okay. She's formed these groups. She had a phenomenal time. She's becoming a very independent person, which is what you want, right? In her little world, she's becoming much more confident and much more independent. And it's kind of fun to watch that happen.
I love that perspective of just celebrating the regular milestones that all kids go through. Because I think it's actually probably worthwhile for me to frame more of my life that way too. Of when things piss me off or are just such a pain in the ass, to be like, hey, we are right where we should be, and let's just celebrate that. This is what 12-year-olds do, or this is what 8-year-olds do.
She's annoying exactly in the way she's supposed to be annoying. Awesome.
It sounds like you've got a lot to be proud of, but what are recent actions or choices that you've taken that have really triggered this sense of pride in you of yeah, I'm crushing it as a dad right now?
Does anybody ever really feel like they're crushing it as a dad?
Okay, to the best you come to that, an approximation of that.
They're still searching for it.
Oftentimes I feel like my job as a dad is just to kind of keep the bus on the road. I'm not exactly, somebody will tell me where we're going eventually. I would love to tell you that it's some big, wonderful, awesome, life-changing, altering moment. But honestly, sometimes it's just the small things. One thing that
that's all we're going for here. Yeah. What happened? Give me a recent one.
One thing I love about my daughter is that she, whether it's her disability or whether it's how we've raised her, there's a level of knowledge and confidence about who she is. That, she's in some ways, she's incredibly fragile, but in some ways she's also bulletproof and does things that I would never have thought of when I was 16. This camp was taught by some people who were professionals in, they were instructors at the University of Journalism, but also local and some national journalists were there helping to teach this camp. And during one of the sessions, one of them was speaking and Eliza had some questions. And so she thought nothing of emailing this person and asking these questions very respectfully. And at the end of the camp, she showed me, she had this, 7 or 8 email long exchange with this professional in the industry, asking very salient questions, very poignant questions, very respectful and well articulated questions. And you're thinking, aren't you the kid that like 7 years ago, just was obsessed with My Little Pony? Like, how are you this person now? No, I was really proud of that. So
you're proud of your daughter, but in terms of your actions as a dad, what of late, what actions as a dad, what practices as a dad have you been proud of?
this is going to require some context, so bear with me, because it has to do with actually part of this camp, and this was actually this last week. In order for Eliza to get college credit, she had to write a reflection, and she had to write this paper about, she had to read a book and write a book report, 4 to 6 pages. And what I was proud of was that she got that done in spite of herself. I'm proud that I was able to kind of see and understand like where her brain was. She was dawdling on that thing like you wouldn't believe. And I could kind of hear one part of myself, the former teacher brain and the dad brain, just wanting to yell at her and say, come on, it's a 4 to 6 page paper. This is like 2 hours. Just get it done. Or,
Right.
But I did make the choice to recognize that, okay, I am 50. And when I was 16 or 17 or 18, writing a 5-page paper, that was a month, and if it didn't interest me, I would find every excuse in the world. I'd go clean my room before I'd write that damn paper. I'd also recognize that, when my parents would yell at me and say that, yeah, this is easy, that it was a weird emotional response. It was almost a shame spiral because, so much of your self-esteem is in being competent or being smart. And then here's this thing that your parents are kind of giving you pressure on, and you just are like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do it. It makes me feel weird doing it. So I did take a second and think, okay, I'm looking at this from the perspective of a 50-some-year-old dude, and like, to me, this is easy. I made the choice to not let her off the hook, but to bring that sense of empathy and perspective to it. What would I have wanted somebody to do with me when I was 16? And so I made the choice of like, well, I would want somebody to give me the script. How do I walk through this? You're laughing? Why?
To what question would I answer? My 16-year-old self or my 12-year-old self would have liked a parent to yell at me right now.
Well, and so then why the hell do we yell as parents, right? Like, or threaten? I mean, because I don't know, either that's how we were taught or whatever. But yeah, that's been weird. Is that because now when I do yell at Eliza, she totally like breaks down. But that's a whole other thing they're working on. But
I'm starting to hate myself. The opposite of this podcast is happening. I'm starting to hate myself.
That has been a conscious choice on mine and Ruby's part to be like, okay, to do our best not to escalate that stuff. I brought her into work with me and like put her in an office with the laptop and just kept checking on her, which of course, now that her dad was giving her help, bothered her even more. And then I had to sort of think, okay, am I giving her too much help?
For my daughter right now, the paralysis thing is cleaning a room. I don't even think it's like limited to childhood. The one thing that I will do anything else in the world before I do that thing, that's still happening to me right now. But it seems to fluctuate in different years because, yeah, Mayana will do anything before she cleans her room.
So I have an idea about this, and I don't know if I'm right, but here's what I'm going with. If you walk into a room and it's totally dirty, it's overwhelming, right? Because all you see is the totality. And so I've had to keep asking Eliza very often, like, okay, what do you have to do right now? Or what do you need to do? What has to happen next? That's been helpful for her. You have this bottle of Mountain Dew in your hand. What has to happen next? It's not intrinsic yet. She still
Yeah.
needs me as a dad to be like, okay.
Maybe you'd like to spend a day in Santa Cruz, California with my daughter doing the same thing.
Given your diagnosis and Eliza's diagnosis, do you feel like you have a better understanding of her, or you and Eliza have kind of a shorthand that's exclusive to the two of you, or is Ruby just as clued in? I'm just curious about the nature of your relationship with her that may be different from Ruby's.
My relationship is different, but that's I did not work the first year that Eliza was born,
I-
and so I mean, I was there that first year. My schedule has almost always been more flexible. My wife Ruby worked in home health, and so her hours were never as flexible as mine were because I worked in education. So I, to this day, am still the most present parent. Ruby is very different than I am in that Ruby is very much an introvert as opposed to an extrovert. Ruby understands her world differently than and processes it differently than I do and Eliza does. Ruby and I both, or Eliza and I both tend to process it linguistically. If something's going on and we can talk about it, then that means we can understand it. Eliza's issue right now is that she doesn't understand the emotions of it. And so sometimes she's so fixated on the emotions, she can't articulate and make that understanding. Ruby has a very different way of processing the world and a very different perspective. And so, in answer to your original question, partially it's because I've been around the most. Partially it's because I think I can more easily put myself into understanding how and why Eliza, like how she's processing this. It doesn't make me a better parent, just makes me a different parent because I can also let the emotions get a little bit too much in the way, which is where then the balance comes from Ruby.
So it's a true partnership, and both of you have certain skills that the combination of the skills round out the parenting that Eliza is getting. It
And
sounds like.
yeah, and I would love to say that she and I are always on the same page.
Let's take the flip side of the proud. What are you least proud of, Chad? Any recent examples of like, oh shit, man, I was not my best self?
Every single day. So
Come on now.
what I wish I were better at as a dad is I wish I were better at not being distracted. One of the hard parts is, you have that list of 80 things you have to do each day, and sometimes just things fall off. And I don't think I necessarily model for Eliza the best way to get shit done and to keep on track with things. I think sometimes, I'm not really proud of that. I wish I were better at that.
Can you give an example of that going awry?
The reason why I'm hedging is because the examples that come immediately to mind don't exactly fit with what I was saying. It was, okay. But actually, I think this will work. There were some peer interactions that she had. The weirdest game that you will ever watch being played, I think, is teenage peer relationships and friendships. I don't know what it is. It's Kelvin Ball mixed with Magic the Gathering, mixed with, I don't know, Parcheesi, just because I like the colors.
I'm going to have to look all of that up after the episode.
You've lost our Irish co-host.
Really?
But continue.
Her friends don't get together the way that like me and my friends did after school. They have a group chat. They never see each other. They just talk on the phones. And somebody let slip that there was going to be a gathering for somebody's birthday. Well, that friend whose birthday it was, there were only a few who could come, and Eliza wasn't on the list, and she wasn't supposed to know about. Like, it was just this weird social dynamic.
That's a thing for us too. Or we're entering the years where that's a thing with.
And of course, my first thought was, F this kid, F this family. Like, they're not your real friend. And of course, what do? You yell and you scream, which of course totally helps the situation when the kid's trying to figure things out. And they're dealing with their own of like, they're having this emotional reaction of trying to figure this out. And all of a sudden dad's yelling at them. Like, yeah. And so that's a small example, but it bothers me.
Was that truly the scenario? Were you up in arms and like dissing her friend's family because of this thing?
Yeah.
To her?
I'm like, they're being mean to my kid. And when Eliza was like 4 years old, we went to the library together, like the local library. And because I would just take her there to play. And I remember that she met a little girl there about the same age. And the mom, I didn't remember what the mom was, but the mom, for some reason, just didn't like the cut of Eliza's jib. And so grabbed her daughter and said, come on, get away from that weird kid. And as soon as I heard weird kid, I don't remember what happened. Like, all I remember in my brain is like, things went red. Because somebody was insulting my kid. Somebody was hurting my kid, like that weird male parental reaction of like, I will kill you. There wasn't that same reaction, but it definitely got animated of like, they're playing this game with you and you need to not play this game and you need to do this instead and this instead. And yeah, so I didn't really help the situation at all by dissing her friends.
Yeah. Well, you're certainly not alone. I think that I certainly have that experience. We all want to protect our kids. I have moments of parental protection when I see my son being rejected by a kid or a group of kids, and yeah, it brings up a lot of emotion. And I brought this up in different episodes, but I once heard that parenting is all about heartbreak. And there's the big heartbreaks and there's the little daily heartbreaks. And, this could be categorized as, even though it is a big issue, and, peer groups and peer relationships. But, as a parent, it's the daily heartbreaks of seeing your kids get hurt or rejected or
right.
be misunderstood. And you're as impacted by it as your kid is, and it's just another example of the little mini micro heartbreaks that we all experience as parents every single day.
Every single day. I get that idea of wanting to make things easier for your kids, right? There were hard lessons you learned as a kid, and there's a certain amount of that has to happen. But as a parent, you're also like, oh, if I do this, I could prevent you from, falling down, having that injury, having that issue. And I get that.
That doesn't develop the child.
But also recognize that sometimes giving too much help is almost a form of harm. Like it's with the best of intentions, right? Here, let me.
It is interesting how it's like the role shifts from being protector to like a framer. Of like, okay, now I'm going to take my hands off of the steering wheel a lot and let you hit the guardrails and let you hit the, overshoot the parking spots. And that will hurt and be okay. But I'm going to be here to frame it for you afterwards of like, hey, that wasn't a failed parking job. That was a big lesson. You're never going to, overshoot the parking spot again.
So what I find a lot of what I do now with Eliza is it's that battle between, oh, this hit is coming, or be like, okay, my job as a parent is to let her take the hit and then script out, model, show, here's how you take that hit and you get up and keep going. Because if she does that now where it's nice and safe and doesn't cost a whole lot of whatever, when it gets to college, when she gets out in, her adult life, hopefully she can take a hit and keep going.
Yeah, weirdly, it's like the coach role of parenting. I'm going to fail at sports metaphor if I go there, but yeah, your job as a football coach is not to prevent your players from getting beaten down and thrown to the ground on the field. It's like framing how you do that over and over again.
Well, I'm curious about your own relationship with your dad, and was it a good relationship? There is an example of love and connection with your dad when you were growing up that stands out?
Any thoughts on that, Matthew? You knew Dicko.
I know that your dad passed it. Is it 2001?
Yeah.
Yeah. So your dad passed away too young. You have my perception of you is you have a somewhat romanticized notion of your dad that from not having him over the years. But give us an example of like dad's love shining through. I know that you've done a lot of deep thinking on dad because you were robbed of yours too early.
The romanticized notion of my dad, I would say, was definitely there in my youth. As you get older, all of a sudden you start seeing things differently.
I'm sorry to interrupt. How old was he when he died? How old were you?
I was 29 and he was 56. One of my first memories of my dad was I had gotten up, I'm probably like 3 or 4. I'd gotten up, I was running outside with my sister, and I fell down and I scraped my knee. And of course, being 3, I'm crying. And my sister comes up and says, "Well, I'll go get Dad." And I said, "Don't get Dad. Dad doesn't care." And stirring off to the day anyway. And my dad came up and I remember him saying, "Listen, I'm going to yell, I'm going to scream, but don't you ever doubt that I care." And that, my dad was a larger than life figure, but again, it's when you're a kid, you romanticize that. As you get older, you realize, oh, there was a lot of bluster there that covered up these insecurities. And some of that is just kind of recognizing those qualities in yourself.
It's always fascinating and interesting to see how my everything about my memories of my dad have two sides to it. There's like how I felt about it at the time, and then the retelling of it of like, I don't know exactly what he was going through in the moment, but I know what I'm going through right now. And I'm like, holy shit, that guy was scared, or he was, overwhelmed, or
And I'll be honest, that's what I lament. That's what I lament is all of a sudden something happens with Eliza and I think, oh my God. And I flash back to something with my dad. I wish I could call him and say, "Dad, was that what you were thinking?" I'm lucky now that one of the things that Masonry has gotten me is a bunch of guys across the ages and who I can call and say, like, is you too? Is this the same? Just have that validation.
There's a magic that happens when dads get together and get to expose their inner worlds. This entire podcast is springboarded from a dad's group that like, hey, we get to share stuff, and there's value just in saying it.
One of the nice things about a Masonic lodge is it is that safe space. It is that tribe where you can actually say to them, "Okay, I'm worried, I'm scared." And to have somebody else say like, "Dude, you're on a roller coaster and I'm like 5 cars ahead of you. I know the turn that's coming. Let me tell you what happened when I got to this turn," and just how delightful that is. And then also to just kind of talk to the guy 5 cars back from you and say, "Dude," my father's last words to me were the words that he always used when he said goodbye. And whenever my father said goodbye to me, he always said, "Love you, proud of you, stay safe." And those are the last words I ever heard from my dad. He had a stroke the week prior to him having a stroke. I got together with him and my family, and across the parking lot, I heard him yell to me and my sister, "Love you, proud of you, stay safe," as he drove away. And so my dad was a flawed human being, but he also, I know that he loved his kids. I know that he loved us. And, he still looms large in my life.
only because I know you. I know again how your relationship to your dad, and I know a lot of the stories of of Dicko. I hear you say call him that, but I can't quite own that one for myself. But I've heard you talk about Dick Kopensky in the larger than life aspect a lot. Could you think of instances, of him not at his best?
That is a really loaded question. What you're basically saying is there something that my dad did that I want to do the absolute opposite of that, right?
Or trend in the other direction.
My dad was from a different time, and so he was raised not thinking that kids had agency, had feelings, had, so often, he would just say, kids should be seen and not heard. If he was upset, he would come home and he would just say terrible, awful things that were just done out of emotion. Like, I don't remember any time that my dad ever hit me, but I do remember my dad calling me stupid or worthless or useless. And, 2 minutes later, he'd forgotten that he said it, but not realizing the effect that those would have. I recognize that in myself. I need to ramp that back.
My family's job is not to be a garbage dumpster for all my emotional outlashings.
Piggybacking on that, I'm curious, that self-awareness, but is there an actionable habit that you practice every day that helps you to stay grounded, that helps you to be a better dad? Is it, do you have a hobby that you go to? Do you have a spiritual practice, a meditative practice? What helps you keep grounded so that you don't venture into those places of lashing out or letting emotions get better of you?
I will tell you that a lot of the growth that I have had in terms of getting my own diagnosis of being neurodivergent, as silly as it sounds, is I often do think of my brain as a solely separate entity other than me. On Facebook, sometimes I'll make posts of conversations between Chad and Chad's brain. Chad's brain that gets really emotional or upset or looking at this thing a particular way that affects kind of what Chad's life is. And so it is probably a prolonged practice of recognizing that my brain isn't always right. A lot of time that inner voice, that negative self-talk, sometimes that's all that is. It's just my brain being my brain. But it's also helped me to be more objective and also to give myself some kindness, right? When my brain is sitting there and saying all manner of awful things about how I'm a terrible father and a terrible husband and a terrible person, and I'm stupid and worthless and ugly and all those things that I would never let anybody talk to somebody else that way. I would never let anybody talk to a child that way. I would never let anybody talk to a stranger that way. Why the hell am I letting Chad's brain say those things to Chad?
Yeah.
It's great to have that recognition.
Donal, do you want to do the wrap up question or statements?
Well, the last question that I would want to ask you, Chad, is in terms of values and policies, money, discipline, dating, that your dad or your family in general instilled in you that you are now, folding in and imbuing your family life with?
Both my parents firmly believed that when you get to the afterlife, whatever that looks like, that whatever power is there is going to judge you based off of two criteria. How well did you use the gifts you were given? And how well did you help those around you? And so that means that my duty here on this planet is to develop my gifts to the best of my ability and then use them in the service of others. whether it's volunteering or helping somebody, or you just, right, take what you're given, develop it to the best of your abilities, but then it's not about you.
Do you guys do volunteer activities with Eliza?
Yes, but some of it is as simple as being like doing church choir.
It's like community activity as volunteerism, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about meaningful connections, right? You're going to get 2 episodes out of this, and I want to tell you this moment. My dad almost ruined my high school graduation. So he had been in the OR almost all day. He came home. It was late. He was tired. My grandfather was there. Our high school graduation, they moved it inside. There's like all these things happening. And when my dad walked in the door and I told him all these changes that were happening, he just blew up. I remember saying, I don't even want to fucking go now. And I remember saying to him, then don't fucking go, Dad. Stay here. And he was so shocked. But after about 10 minutes, he came over and he, like, all of a sudden he realized, oh, wait, I messed up. And he apologized and he talked to me. And, he ended up coming. But my dad was young and, he had to learn too that, your kids are people and they have their own thoughts, words, and deeds. I remember that moment because I did feel validated and heard and seen and respected and all that stuff.
The one last thing that I would just want to pull back to, and maybe it makes it on the episode, maybe it doesn't, and maybe it was just a throwaway facetious comment, but we were just talking about, Matthew was saying, oh, we got to wrap up, and you were like, well, I don't have a life and I have no friends. I hope that's not true, and I hope that was just a throwaway comment, because one of the things that this podcast tries to achieve is to build community and to let people know that there's a community out there beyond this podcast that people can lock into. We can officially, at the end of this episode, having had this great conversation, we can officially declare you to be an extraordinary dad. So keep up the great work.
That's nice of you to say that. This has been fun.
Extraordinary Dads!
Well, there you have it. Another extraordinary dad, and great episode with Chad. So Thank you, Matthew, for bringing a childhood friend into the conversation.
Any takeaways?
Yeah. So, one of the reasons we put this podcast out into the world is to have collective wisdom out there. And I loved. I think he was talking about his relationship with his Masonic brothers, and I think he used the phrase, you're on a roller coaster and I'm 5 cars ahead of you. And I just love that. I love the fact that there is a body of wisdom out there and people have gone ahead of us in their parenting, and they're 5 cars ahead of us, and they know the dips and the curves and the excitements and the belly churning.
Almost wet myself.
Yeah. So it just, I love that. It's kind of a reinforcement for me that there is collective wisdom out there, and to always tap into it and to always ask for the help and the guidance that we need. So I just that was just a wonderful way of framing that.
Yeah, I like that metaphor too. Also, good reminder for the dude tendency of like, I got this all under control and I know everything I need to know. Of like, no, you're in the middle car. You don't know what's ahead of you.
Yeah, exactly.
I loved hearing his dad's mantra to him.
Dicko.
Dicko, that's right. Love you, proud of you, stay safe.
Yeah.
I have a mantra with my kids that happens to be, your daddy will always love you. And I wonder if others have theirs. Do you have one?
Well, when I drop Dylan off at school in the morning, and he's getting out of the car, the last thing I'll say to him is, I love you. I'm proud of you. Have fun today. So
Nice. That's a perfect mantra too.
yeah.
Well, let's sign off on this episode, paying respect to Dicko.
Yep.
Donal, love you, proud of you. Stay safe.
Yeah. We'll see everybody next time.
Dad.